have to, bring my best self. So that really inspires me and motivates me. I'm a very community-oriented person, so I get a lot of energy from doing things for the community. So just kind of reminding myself of why I'm doing this and why I'm here really helps. Like, I don't like socializing for socializing's sake, but if there's a purpose, I'm gonna do it.
Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of Oh My Create Goodness podcast. I'm your host, Hamza Islam, and this is a podcast where I talk to Gen Zers who are making a difference in their communities about their journey and how they became the person they are today. I want to truly know what it's like to be a human being and just see how they see life from their perspective. Because ultimately, while every one of us have a destination or a goal we want to reach, we cannot underestimate how important it is to talk about one's journey, because these stories are ultimately what make us human beings. It doesn't matter who you are. This is one of the few things that we have in common. Now, this week, I'm very excited to have Ohio State Representative Munira Abdullahi, who's one of the first Somali-American and first Muslim woman in the Ohio State Legislature. She is someone who I actually got to meet in person, and I remembered when I first met her, I'm a terrible human being, so I immediately just said, "Hey, State Representative Munira Abdullahi, I'm so glad to meet you," and I forgot to say my name. But we've got to meet over time, and we were just talking about when exactly we're going to make this happen. But I'm really glad that she found the time, because I know she's a very busy person dealing with all the political stuff happening in the state of Ohio. So State Representative Munira Abdullahi, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I'm glad that we could find a time.
Thank you for having me. And like I said, your introduction was perfect. You went straight to business, and so glad I'm here.
No, I appreciate it. And I'm really glad that we actually got to be able to make this happen. And I know you are a very busy person, because as a state legislator, anyone involved in the political landscape has 1,000 things going on. But I do want to ask you, because I know, given that you are now one of the first Somali-American, first Muslim woman in the state legislature, I feel like now you are someone that has really opened the door for possibilities for people who look like you. I do want to ask how much your life has changed since all of this, because I know, I'm sure that your life was busy before all this, but now it feels like everywhere you go, people just want to have you at some sort of event. And I remembered, I would see on your social media, you're going from one event to another event to another event. And I think while it's great to interact with the community, there's definitely a lot of things going on. It can sometimes be hard to just look after yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten a lot busier. I think before I was like, just feeling good. I just said yes to every opportunity. So I was doing a lot of things. And now, like, I'd even dropped many of those things. So I'm still doing all of my previous work. I'm still like the youth director for the local Muslim-American Society chapter, and I'm the program manager for Mass National, and I'm the state representative. But yeah, it's like people want me at a million different events. I'm not a very social person, but I know how important it is to them. So I'm like, as an introvert, just going out there, putting myself out there. It's so exhausting, but I know it's worth it, because this is what the community kind of needs me for. But it's a lot. Yeah, like I'll wake up and I'll go straight to business, and then I'll be out the house till 9-10 p.m. So it'll be like a 9 to 9 or 10 to 10 kind of day. So they're just really, really long days. Still trying to figure out the balance of like taking care of myself and doing all these things, but I haven't really fit my own self-care schedule yet. It's been like I know it's been like 6 months. Like, I should have figured it out by now. But the legislature is very busy, because not only do I have to do all these social events and community engagement to make sure people know that I still care for them, still out there, I still have to do the actual job they hired me for, or they voted me in for, which is representing them in the state house. And if you may not, I don't know if you know, but the Ohio State House is a really crazy place. So we're dealing with a lot of, for lack of a better word, craziness. So just like we're on a defense mode every single day, and then we have to also do like our appearances and things like that. And then we also have to do there's also political appearances. So there's community appearances, political appearances, and then there's like the actual work. So yeah, it's a lot.
I can't imagine. I feel like it's hard, because it's from a state legislative perspective, you're trying to just do all the legislative process. And then I feel like that's what makes it difficult, because you are constantly trying to figure out how to, you're trying to figure out the correct, not the correct thing, but you're trying to figure out how to how to help the state in whatever way that may be. But then it's also like, wait a minute, you're also going out to events, and then oftentimes it feels like there's a misconception between who you really are. So it's like for me, I'm like, oh, I guess she has it easy because all you have to do is just participate in events. But then you also mentioned the fact that our state house can be a bit hectic at times, and so it's like now I got to do that side. So I can't imagine how you're doing this, but I'm glad that in a way, and it was interesting because I didn't know about the introvert fact that you're able to kind of just let yourself be known. I think, and I mean, especially because in the political aspect, and feel free to be more specific in this, it definitely challenges you to be more courageous and brave because it's definitely not easy, especially when you are talking to people who are different from you. And even if you're like you said, the introvert part, the fact that you're just trying to challenge yourself and just try to be the best version of you, I think it's never an easy thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, it's really not. You have to push yourself out of your comfort zone constantly. Then you got to go home and recharge.
I want to start with talking about your family because you are the second person of Somalian descent who I've had on this podcast. I had Tukwila Councilman Muhammad Abdi back in February, and he talked about his challenges being a councilman. But I want to start from the beginning in the sense that you grew up in a family of 9 children, which is it's interesting because very rarely do I get to meet people who grew up in a very large family. For me, I grew up with just a younger brother, so it's just me and my brother and then my mom and dad. Tell me a bit about what it was like to be able to grow up in a large family. And secondly, one of the things I sort of connect with you on is that you're the eldest in your family. So is there a part of you where you wished you were like one of the younger ones? Because it almost feels as though your younger siblings are able to learn from your failure. So it's like, I'm going to make sure I don't do this because she did this and it didn't work well. So is there a part of you where you're just like, I wish I was the youngest one so I didn't have to I had someone to, I guess, learn from mistakes, if that makes sense.
No, not really. I mean, because I feel like learning from them personally, failure is the best teacher. You really become more wise, and you learn a lot from your individual failures. So I wouldn't take them away. And also, I get to be the boss. I got all these like minions, so it's enjoyable. It definitely is a lot of responsibility, a lot of work, but I don't negate the fact that it's what taught me how to be a leader, and it's what taught me how to be compassionate and how to problem solve. It was like most of them, it's like 7 of them are girls. Well, yeah, 8 of us are girls. So for the longest, it was all girls. So a lot of problem solving, a lot of de-escalation. But being the oldest really taught me a lot of skills for leadership, and I think it's definitely one of the reasons why I'm here today as a leader, and it's why I've thrived in so many leadership positions. Like first generation, eldest daughter is no joke at all. So no, I would not want to be the youngest. I feel like they don't have a lot of character. They're kind of spoiled.
No, I definitely agree because I feel like for a lot of us, we hate the term failure because it's like we just want to make sure everything is right at the end of the day. And so I think seeing it that way is interesting where you're able to learn from your mistakes. And because ultimately I think another thing that because we are so scared of failure, and like I mentioned how you're not afraid to just kind of put yourself out there, the willingness to, I guess, embrace failure, embrace the things that don't go your way is an important skill to have. And I think the fact that you're able to have it, that maybe your other siblings aren't, it's kind of bragging rights because you might be successful at the end of the day. I don't want to make it sound that like, I wish you guys all the worst, but it's like, I'm able to learn from these things because ultimately it's going to help me become a better person. And I think it's a message for a lot of us where the earlier we embrace failure and the more okay we are, while it's not okay to, I guess, it's not like I don't want to say that it's a good thing to fail per se. Like, I don't want you to fail and be like, I'm happy I failed, but rather it's okay to be like, you know what, if these things don't go my way, it's fine because ultimately, while I may lose in the short term, I might actually be successful in the long term. And I feel like because of the things you've learned from your childhood, it's now shaped you into why you are here today as one of the state representatives.
Yeah, certainly. It's definitely not natural. It's something that I had to learn because perfectionism is also a thing. But just, uh, there's wisdom in recognizing what your failures and recognizing that they did happen for a reason. And alhamdulillah for Islam, like I realized like everything happens for a reason. So if I failed, this is like a lesson that Allah's trying to teach me. And I need to take whatever I can from that lesson and not waste it and then move forward to the next thing. So I try not to fail. When I do, I step back and I humble myself. First, I cry a little bit, then I humble myself, and I and I take the lessons and move on. That's
No, I think
wisdom.
I think we can all relate to that. But I want to transition a little bit to the fact that I mentioned in the beginning you are one of the first Somali American women in the state legislature, and I do want to talk about the relationship you have with your identity because I think correct me if I'm wrong, you actually were born in Somalia and you moved to I think Utah and then you moved to Columbus. Um,
It
or
was Kenya, so I was born in Kenya first, and
oh,
then
okay.
because I was in the refugee camp, I was born in the refugee camp. Then we went to Utah and then Columbus.
Oh, okay. So in that case, how would you describe the relationship you had with your own identity, especially growing up in a culture that's vastly different? Because for me, I mean, I was born in the United States, but my parents were born in Bangladesh. And so the culture is vastly different when comparing to South Asian culture or South Asian country to the United States. So for you growing up, were you, I guess, I don't want to say were you proud of your identity, but were you someone that kind of questioned or tried to, I guess, fit in by trying to become someone you're not? Or were you always staying true to who yourself, regardless of whatever the changes may be?
Well, first of all, Bengalis are literally the coolest people, so that's awesome. Um, I I don't know. I think I was one of the very stubborn mindset. Not only am I the leader for my siblings, but I have a lot of cousins. So I think they've always looked up to me. So I don't know if that kind of gave me the confidence to be who I am. I don't know. I'm trying to find the factors here, but um, mainly as a Muslim, as a Somali as well, but mainly as a Muslim, especially because my parents really fostered an environment where I could feel comfortable. Like my dad, he founded two Islamic centers. Like one of them kind of started, he restarted it, and then the other one he started himself. So I grew up in the masjid and I grew up in these spaces with other people like me. So I did feel the confidence to be more like myself. And then when I went outside into the real world, I didn't feel the need to conform. I kind of understood the value of being myself and that, the diversity of the world is what makes the world better, especially, the diversity of America. It's a very diverse country. And trying to assimilate and become like everyone else, it just kind of kills the fun. I don't know. I've always been a weird person. I embraced it. So I'm like, I'm already weird. Let me embrace my actual identities. So I think it gave me a lot of success. I think people do resonate with you when you don't try to be someone that you're not. So alhamdulillah, I've always been true to myself and not really afraid to embrace my identities. And again, I think being in these places really did help. Like growing up in the masjid and growing up in math, I got to see people who are proud of who they are. And math is literally Muslim American society. Like the motto is to become Muslim Americans who are beneficial to American society and are still true to their Islamic identity. So I think that growing up in that environment really helped me shape my identity and be strong in it.
Yeah. Tell me a bit about what led you to doing public service because I saw somewhere I think you wanted to get into med school and then you ended up doing something, you wanted to pursue architecture, but then you ended up now deciding to go on this public policy journey.
Mm-hmm.
What ultimately led to you doing that? And why you decided you felt how you knew that this was something you wanted to do and not something where you kind of were going to regret later on in the future?
Yeah, I like that. So originally, well, firstly, I was always in public service, right? I've been in math as a youth director and doing community service, community work throughout all of high school. It was kind of like a side thing that I did. And I just, was like, it's my personality. I didn't think of it as a career. Um, so I really liked, I did career center in high school and I really enjoyed the medical class. I did amazing. I was like, top of the class. I had like 4.5 in the medical classes. And I was like, I'm gonna go to med school. And I interned for a doctor and I hated it. And I was like, I can't do this, man. But I did enjoy like science and I do enjoy biology and all that stuff. But then then I just transitioned to architecture. So I was like, I want to do something creative. I have ADHD, by the way, if you can't tell. So I was like, I want to do something fun. I want to do something exciting. And at the time we were like thinking of expanding the math center. I was like, I want to design the math center. So I went into architecture and I realized it was like a lot of engineering and math and not a lot of drawing like I thought. So it's not for me. And then kind of did exploratory classes and I realized I really enjoyed and during the time there was like a lot of I mean there always is, but there was like a lot of turmoil happening in like the global sphere. So I got really interested in defense, like war and peace, counterterrorism, and just peace and security and diplomacy. So I started taking a lot of classes like that. And so my degree was actually political science, international relations, diplomacy, with a focus on like peace and security. So my thoughts were go to the UN or State Department and just, do something in the world. I don't know what I thought I was going to do, like foster world peace or something. But then in 2020, that kind of shifted. I guess, there's a lot happening in the world and there's a lot happening in America. So I got more involved in local politics and the protests, and then just grassroots movements. And I realized like there's so much going on at home. So this is where I want to focus my efforts. I started connecting and I realized I was in a very special position where, I had community trust. So I could start communicating with local officials and connecting them to the community, fostering that trust, trying to build like, better relationships with them. But then the redistricting happened and we had brand new maps for Ohio. And if you may not know, it was very gerrymandered maps, which was like really bad. They just like drew the maps however they wanted and they added new spots and just to make the majority win. But out of those new spots, there was a new district that the math center was right in the middle of. So it's a brand new district and no one has it. It's where the last 10, 12 years as a public servant, right, as a nonprofit person. And just spoke to some people. I'm like, you know what? Instead of waiting for someone else to run for it and then complaining about it later on, potentially, why not go for it myself? So, with the support of a couple people around me, spoke to the party had a new director then, and he's a really young guy. He's almost my age, and he's a person of color. And he was like, look, let's get you in there. It's about time. So he really supported me throughout the way, and other people like him. So I just decided, you know what? I've always been the kind of person who's like, if I see a problem, like I'm gonna try to solve it myself and not wait for anyone else. So I just went for it.
I feel like that's probably the best thing we can always do, which is the fact that like if no one else is doing it, we might as well. And it kind of tying back to when we first started talking about the fact that even though you grew up as the eldest, you were bound to make mistakes, but ultimately you're gonna think about, okay, I want to take this or I'm gonna take this opportunity by the horns. I forget the analogy, but um, it's about taking that opportunity. And obviously, yeah, there are things that are not going to go your way, but ultimately, it is a learning experience, and it's going to suit you into becoming a better person. Now, you brought up something interesting, which is the fact that you could have worked at the UN, or you could have tried to work at the UN, but ultimately, you're very passionate about local politics and grassroots as well. And as a state representative, I'd love for you to talk about how important local politics are, because we care so much about what's going on at the federal level, and rightfully so, don't get me wrong, but also more importantly, you are someone that's trying to make the state of Ohio, your community better. And sometimes we don't really understand how critical local politics are. So I'd love for you to talk about, how important that aspect is.
Yeah, man, this is what I've been preaching. Like local politics is everything. Like we think that the presidential elections and even congressional elections mean much, but really they don't affect us that much. The presidential elections will affect us marginally, and if they do, they'll affect us like a couple years later when their policies finally come into place. But local politics affects you like today, tomorrow, like the next 5 years, next 10 years. Like they're always affecting us. So electing the right people locally is so important. When people complain about school funding, they complain about the streets, they complain about police, you complain about even local like healthcare, it's still local. Even college, a lot of these things can be solved locally, and it's because of local officials where we either have this progress or this hindrance. So who you elect as a state representative, as a commissioner, as a city council member, as a mayor is so important for like literally every issue that affects you in your everyday life. And we see the differences between different states on how their local officials are affecting their policies. Like just to look at Minnesota, like they just got a majority this GA, right? Like a very slight majority for Democrats, and they've got to pass better health care. They passed paid family leave and sick leave. They passed minimum wage increase for Uber drivers. They passed driver license for undocumented immigrants. They passed, God, it's just like the longest list of things that are going to affect people and make their lives better in the next 2 to 5 years, like immediately. So it's huge. I can't understate how important it is to get involved in local politics and like, just at least vote.
Yeah, do you feel like, as someone who is a state legislator, do you feel like that's something you want to um, continue to communicate with other people? Because I mean, obviously, we are now seeing a lot of candidates start announcing their presidential runs, and it's like, all right, 2024, let's get ready. But then it's also easy to forget that we also have an election coming up we have an election in 2023. So do you feel like, as someone, as a state representative, that's something you want to continue to communicate with the people that you are serving, or even like with all the events that you're attending, the importance of continuing to vote as if it is a presidential election? Like 2023, we're not going to see presidents, but nevertheless, it's still important to vote in these elections at the end of the day.
Yeah, I talk about it a lot, and I'm going to continue talking about it because these are the colleagues that I have to work with, and these are the people who will block or pass my bills. And unfortunately, like I say this all the time, this Ohio State House is not a great place right now. I mean, we have an insane supermajority. We have bills on the back burner that would literally save lives. Like we have a universal health care for all Ohioans bill. We have gun protections, gun safety bills. We have minimum wage increase bills. We have bills that will make it better for people who are recently in the incarceration system. We have insane amounts of bills that access for everyday people. We have bills that just won't even make it onto the floor because we have the super majority, and some people just don't want it to come to the floor. Like it's literally they won't let it come to the floor. We can't even vote on it, talk about it. So these are the people that you elected. These are the people who are stopping progress. Like we have to vote them out and vote some decent people in, so we can actually get things moving. So I definitely will talk about it because I'm one person, I'm one vote. I can't like just make things happen on my own. And my friendly colleagues are like 32, so it's very hard to get anything done.
I want to transition into kind of going back to now your journey as a state representative, because you talked about how, when we were talking about like what it's like to be able to participate in all these events, you described yourself as an introvert, and now you're kind of putting yourself out in the public. And as someone who had that when you were first starting out, how difficult was it to be able to convince people to vote for you and vote for the policies that you believe in? Because even though you have a really good idea, and obviously it's like no one else is getting involved, why not me? But then there's also these things where you have these internal battles that you're going through. So it's like being an introvert, or trying to get out of that zone of being an introvert, is never easy. And I'll admit, I'm also an introvert as well. So trying to be able to tell people who I am can be a difficult journey. So even though you really believe in something and that you think that you can best serve your community, tell me about what it was like early on, trying to get the word out and trying to battle that introvert part of you.
Yeah, I am an introvert, but I'm an introvert with like surprisingly good social skills. So that really helped. And I learned a lot of my social skills from I did sales in like college. So to get me through college, I really used to work at Best Buy. So working at Best Buy really helped me tweak my social skills and get better at it. So I can be pretty charming, but I have to really hype myself up before every event. Like I gotta give myself pep talk. For my political events, I found like a buddy who's extroverted, so we just go to all the events together. So he talks. And then for like social events, I really run off of the energy of these people really want me to be here. They trust me and they look up to me. So I have to, bring my best self. So that really inspires me and motivates me. I'm a very community oriented person. So I get a lot of energy from doing things for the community. So just kind of reminding myself of why I'm doing this and why I'm here really helps. Like I don't like socializing for socializing's sake, but if there's a purpose, I'm gonna do it.
I can agree. I feel like the same way where like even though I'm an introvert as well, I do I mean I there are moments where like as long as there's a purpose, I'm willing to give you the best version of me. And so I saw somewhere that you didn't have an opponent like a Republican opponent, but you did have a primary, and you ended up winning that. But then ultimately when election day came, you just ran unopposed, and so you ended up winning. But nevertheless, how difficult was the campaign as a whole? Because I feel like even if you ran unopposed, it feels like it's an easy win or a journey because ultimately your biggest opponent would then be the person you're battling in the primaries. But as far as trying to get the word out, trying to get people to believe in you, trying to put trust in someone that maybe we haven't seen in the past or in the state of Ohio, how difficult was it still to be able to convince people that you are the right person for the job, even if you didn't have a direct opponent?
Yeah, I think most of the work was definitely during the primaries. Um, it was a lot of work, but I thankfully had a lot of community members behind me and a lot of volunteers. I mean, like young people really came out, like Somali people really came out, Muslim people really came out. And I think that was super helpful. Like I had a team behind me. I was learning things like as I went because I didn't have like official campaign manager in the beginning. Um, and then I started having like a consultant for a little bit. But the learning process is really hard because there's so much that goes into a campaign. Like you really have to um, like you have a lot of boxes to check off, especially fundraising. Like unfortunately, so much of American politics is tied to money, and how much you fundraise is directly correlated to how much power you can get or how much um, exposure you can get. So even if you're not running against anyone, like the amount of money you raise is how your colleagues will look at you in the future, and like how many opportunities you get in certain things. Um, so raising money was definitely the hardest part. Just trying to host all these events and knock doors and print out literature and pass those out. It was fun, but it was difficult. Like it was fun because there was so many like young people in my campaign team. We had a good time. You know, made a competition, and we really bonded. But yeah, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. I think the most important thing though was like getting the endorsement, and that was the hardest thing. Like that was where I was like, this is like a milestone. If I can win the endorsement, so the endorsement will decide whether my campaign is easy or extremely difficult. So that endorsement like meeting. So the way this works is like you go to a meeting with the Democratic Central Party, and they'll have or the county party. They'll have like a before the meeting. Sorry, they'll do interview, screening, and then you do like the mini. Like it's really scary. Like you do an interview with like four people in like one big room. There's like they have a circle table around you. And that's the screening process. And then you do the actual meeting with like I think it's 200 members. I think at that day 118 showed up, and everyone gets a speech. Everyone gets like 10 minutes to do a speech. 10 minutes that feels really long, but it was like a couple minutes to do a speech, and your opponent also gets that. So the screening committee ended up unanimously nominating me. So they're like, yeah, we like her. We're going to unanimously nominate her for recommendation. We're going to recommend her. And then I did the speech, and then my opponent did the speech. There's also other people. It was a long day. We were voting on those guys too. And then people got to vote on whether they want to endorse me or him. So luckily, I ended up having, a speech that really resonated with people. Like they really loved it, and I got 98 out of the 118 votes. So it was, and that was like, I was like, dang, now the campaign is gonna be pretty smooth because once you get that endorsement, it's really supported. Like they give you a lot of resources to put you on the sample ballot. So it was like hard, but it wasn't horrible. If that makes sense. Like it was a good experience. It was fun.
No, that makes sense. Now, the common criticism when it comes to labeling people as politicians is that sometimes we forget that at the end of the day that you guys are human beings. And so when people advocate for certain issues, they'll go, oh, politicians are politicians. They're not real human beings. We're suffering or we are victims of whatever that may be. And it is very difficult to really try to put ourselves in your shoes. So yes, you are State Representative Munira Abdullahi, but you're also a human being just like everyone else. And so for you personally, what do you feel like has been your biggest fear as a state representative? Because politics, like I said in the beginning, it's a scary field to be in and so many misinterpretations. So for you, even though you're trying to do good, and trying to help inspire communities, wherever you go, what do you feel like is your biggest fear that you hopefully are trying to overcome, during this whole journey?
I think it's not achieving like policy wins, I guess. Just like uh trying to make things pass is super important to me, but it's looking very, very impossible. So really just trying to get things passed and having a track record of like successful policy. That's one of the big things that I really care about. I was worried like in the beginning of like misinterpretation and like people, misreading my intentions or something like that. But then I realized like a lot of this is just if you just are really you focus on communication and are transparent, people people really respond well to that. So I try to be as transparent as possible, like on my social media accounts. Like I'm very honest and truthful. I am worried about like any controversial votes that come up. So far, nothing has really come up, but just yeah, it really is like my policy success. Like how successful am I passing laws that would benefit people?
I think it is really important to be able to be as transparent as possible because for so many politicians, it's like, what are you guys doing? And then it's very hard to understand what they're doing because there's no way to really communicate. But yeah, I have seen your stuff on social media, and obviously we'll put that on the episode notes for people to follow. But it is hard. It's. I'm glad that there are people like you that are willing to kind of give, I guess, like a behind the scenes look of what exactly is happening, because there's always going to be people that go, there's nothing's being done, but then at the end of the day there is something being done. It's just it's a lot more complicated than you think at the end of the day. And before I let you go, I do want to talk about, and I hate to ask you this because I know you just started your role, but what do you hope people remember you for? Because obviously, like we mentioned before, you're one of the first Somali American, first woman in the Ohio State Legislature. Um, Obviously, I feel like, and I'm probably going to ask this after you answer this question, but like I feel like there's a lot of pressure on you to be the best version of you and to inspire people who look like you to be able to recognize that anything is possible, whether it comes to being a state representative or a person itself. What do you feel like is your biggest goal that you hope to accomplish?
In the state legislature, it would be um, passing some bipartisan policy. And then two, I'm starting to really enjoy like being very like critical in committee. So asking good committee questions and breaking people down that come in with terrible bills or testimonies. That's been really fun. So I think just someone who's like hard hitting with their questions and breaks these testimonies down, and then someone who passes bipartisan policies.
Do you ever, and this is gonna be my last question, how much pressure do you put yourself in that you try to be the best politician possible so that you're able to convince other people, other Somali Americans that, this is possible? Because I mean, in South Asian cultures, and I'm sure, I don't know if this is the way, if you relate to this in like the Somali culture, but we can be our biggest allies, but we are also our biggest critics. So do you feel like as someone, how much, I guess the question I want to ask is how much pressure do you put yourself in hoping that there continues to be more people like you in the future?
Yeah, definitely a lot, especially in being a first is really crucial because there's so many eyes on you, and like there was no example before you. So it's very crucial the example that you set. It's gonna set the stage for other people going forward. So there's a lot of pressure for sure, and also like just generally like the amount of leadership is so serious. And, like the amount of the trust of leadership, it's super important. It's super serious. So I definitely don't take that lightly. Because I know I'll be asked about it, right, at the end of the day. So I take that very seriously, and I really do want to bring in other people, but generally people who have like good intentions though. Like I am not deluded in thinking like just because they're Somali or Muslim, like they're gonna come in with good intentions. Like I've seen people come in and they don't have good intentions. They just want to make a name for themselves, and they're not in it for the community, and that's gonna hurt us at the end of the day. Sometimes representation is not always good, and that's controversial to say, but those people come in, and since there's so little of us, the world will see them as the representation for all of us. And if they are not doing a good job, it's going to hurt us in the long run, in the short run. So making sure that there's quality people coming in that care about the community, that represent the community in very honest and quality ways is super important to me. So anyone that tries to come in, like I honestly I will gatekeep the community, to be honest with you. I'll be like, what are your intentions? Like, what are you here for? Like, what do you want to do? And how are you going to achieve it? So if I see someone with good intentions and they really want to make a difference, they want to make a change, and they have a good and honest personality, I'm going to make the way for them, and I'm going to help them and help them every step of the way. So, for example, like this is not even in Ohio, but there's my good friend of mine now. His name is Parvez Agwan. He's running for Congress, actually, and he'll be the first South Asian, he's from Pakistan, South Asian and Muslim congressman in Texas if he wins. And he's, did a little phone interview. Like, he's an amazing guy. He has good intentions. He has good policies, good background. Like, I'm like, you go, dude. I want to support you. I want to help you out. We're gonna make it happen. Also, if you're in Columbus, he's gonna come to Columbus the 24th, I think, June 24th. But like, supporting those kind of people is really important to me.
Yeah, I mean, it is really important to understand a person's intentions because, and it goes back to the why you do things at the end of the day, because if you're in it for the right reasons and not worry so much about trying to, it's not like something I guess you could brag about or kind of like let people remember you for, as long as you do it because you want to use your skills for the greater good and find a way to improve your communities, that's what politics is about. And you're right, we do need a lot more people that want to do it because they see good in something or they want to change something, rather than, obviously, unfortunately, in the politics we live in today, sometimes it's all about money and not about the community's interest, or like what's in the interest of the community that you're serving. And so I do hope that there are a lot of people like you and that you care so much about the community building and making sure that people know what's going on, because I think there are a lot of people that are committed in politics, but ultimately they don't know where to go. But you're someone that's willing to try to help as many people as possible, as long as they have good intentions. So, State Representative, I know you have a lot of things going on. I know how busy it can be, but I just want to say thank you so much for joining the podcast. I'm really glad that we got to have this conversation, and I look forward to seeing all the great things you do in the state legislature and in the future.
Well, thank you for having me, and keep doing what you're doing. If you ever need anything else from me, feel free to contact me anytime. My doors are open. I'm not, the hard to reach politician. It might take me a few days to respond, but I will respond.
No,
so thank you. Young people, please go out and vote. Your future does depend on it. Like, as dramatic as that sounds.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. If you guys like what you saw, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at the OMCG Podcast for more information on guests, preview clips, and more. Please continue to support this podcast, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next episode.